If you remember driving tanks on Geonosis, trying to outrun the pink fog of doom, and taking on a giant Sith UFO, then you grew up playing the Clone Wars video game, which has just been re-released for the PlayStation 5. And in this video, we're going to take a look back at this Star Wars classic, compare it to the original version, and see if it still holds up. But first, let's set the scene. Attack of the Clones had a lot of tie-in games, but instead of just having the games be focused on the movie's plot, LucasArts decided to try something different, which is how we'd get Bounty Hunter set a decade before Episode 2, and Jedi Starfighter, which is set concurrently but follows a separate plot. However, LucasArts' most interesting experiment would end up being a game based on the Clone Wars themselves, but we didn't actually get to see any of them in Attack of the Clones apart from the Battle of Geonosis, and so the publisher decided to have most of the game be set after the movie. I mean, that's a pretty bold move. Can you imagine Disney allowing EA to release a Star Wars game set after The Force Awakens only a month after the movie's release? Now, the development of the Clone Wars game would be given to Pandemic, a relatively new studio who had only done a few RTS games up to that point. And ironically enough, Pandemic would use this game as a springboard to developing two of the most beloved Star Wars games ever made. But what about the Clone Wars? How good was it, and does it still hold up on PlayStation 5? Well, straight away from the start menu, you can see the clones are looking a bit more crisp than before. Oh, hey Bill. But just like most of these modern PlayStation ports, they are just running the original game on a PS2 emulator. The resolution is higher, but the textures are still the same. The game itself does run at widescreen, but certain assets like the map have been stretched, as have the cutscenes, so get used to seeing a lot of wide Anakin. You can also rewind the game and make save states, which is a nice feature. But what about the game itself? How good is it? Well, we start with a prologue set right before the Battle of Geonosis, where 100,000 Jedi Starfighters are trying to quietly sneak up on the Separatists. Mace Windu and Luminara go on ahead to disable the planetary shield so the rest of the fleet can get in. But they're not going to use their Starfighters. Oh no, you've got to play the other game for that. They're going to go in tanks. That's right, 90% of the Clone Wars game is set around vehicular combat. Most of the vehicles will come with a standard weapon and a special weapon that needs to be reloaded. There is an auto-lock feature for all of the vehicles, plus the game provides special power-ups scattered around the levels like invincibility and weapon boosters. And so Mace and Luminara make their way to the power generator, blowing up everything in their sight. Also, Luminara is really needy in this level.
Mace, 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 Mace.
Poor Mace gets so fed up that he just jumps out of the tank straight into a pit of droids. Now, the other 10% of this game has you play as the Jedi on foot, who still kind of control a bit like the tanks. Their special moves include Saber Throw and Force Push, which acts more like a nuclear blast, destroying everything in its path. Mace and Luminara then escort the Jedi transports to the arena, pausing for a quick toilet break on the way. And so the Battle of Geonosis begins, and look at the absolute carnage.
Good. I will find a way to take down those Techno-Union ships. It should slow down their retreat.
I must say, the high resolution really does bring out the detail in all of these cardboard cutout clones. It also looks like the Kaminoans haven't been feeding some of these clones very well. Mace then gets into the dropship and flies around blowing up all of the Techno-Union transports. And I love the green lasers on the dropships in this game. They just lock onto anything around you and fry it. Mace then gets back into the tank and defends the cannons while they take down the orbital ships. The level ends with him taking on Dooku's dark acolytes in the ancient Jedi and Sith art of tank-on-tank combat. And I must say, all these years later, the tanks and dropships are still really fun to pilot. Sure, the tanks can be a bit slippery, but it's so satisfying to launch a bunch of missiles at an enemy and watch it disintegrate. The main story picks up a month after the movie, when Anakin and badly voiced Obi-Wan discover a Separatist outpost on Renvar.
I'm picking up multiple targets on my sensors coming out of hyperspace.
This level has you take on the Separatist forces who are trying to excavate something mysterious. More on that later. Mace and Yoda then send Obi-Wan and Anakin to the junk planet of Rexus Prime, the same one we'll explore later in The Force Unleashed. We start with a speeder bike chase, at the end of which Obi-Wan discovers another excavation site.
Whatever it is, we can't allow them to have it.
Luckily, the reinforcements soon arrive and the Jedi can begin their assault. Oh yeah, look at that PS5 frame rate. At this point, you're also able to issue basic battle commands to your fellow party members. Alright, let's give it a try. Attack.
That is not possible. Cannot comply.
Oh, no wonder Obi-Wan hates hated Anakin. Unfortunately, Anakin is eventually captured by Dooku and his bounty hunter, but luckily he ends up being cellmates with the smuggler lady, who explains that Dooku has come into possession of an ancient Sith weapon known as the Force Harvester, which drains the Force from all living things around it. And now the Count intends to test it on Anakin and the Wookiee inhabitants of this Kashyyyk moon. And this is where you can tell the game came out before Revenge of the Sith. Imagine Palpatine's reaction if you found out that Dooku wasted Anakin on some random Force artifact. Anyway, Anakin and his new friend break out just in time to escape the Force Harvester being activated. You can also free the Wookiees as a bonus objective, which never really made sense to me, because they physically can't outrun the pink mist of death. Maybe this was a secret foreshadowing of Anakin's dark side, give the Wookiees a moment of hope before their inevitable demise. The rest of the level has Anakin on a droid step trying to outrun the pink smoke, and if you take too much damage, for some reason R2's gonna scream. Plus, when Anakin runs out of health, he will just disintegrate into pieces.
Just a little further.
Yeah, he's not gonna answer you, lady. Eventually, Anakin does reach the Wookiee settlement.
I just need some way to transmit a distress call to Obi-Wan.
So, what transport will the Wookiees give young Skywalker to aid him on his journey? You guessed it, a dinosaur with lasers on its back. Something tells me Anakin's not gonna be telling Padme about his time riding dinosaurs through a forest with this yoga pants wearing smuggler. Skywalker and his platonic lady friend then spend the next 2 levels helping the Wookiees liberate their planet, just in time for the Republic's arrival.
It's about time. I thought I was gonna have to fight this whole war by myself. I'm sure you would have too.
Top banter from the boys. The level ends with a boss battle against this big droid eyeball landing craft thing. After a successful mission, the Jedi decide to chill out for a bit and reminisce about the good old days of the Jedi-Sith War. Turns out the Force Harvester acts as a battery for the Dark Reaper, an ancient Sith weapon which was destroyed by the fallen Jedi Ulic Qel-Droma. Anakin and Obi-Wan are sent back to Renvar, Ulic's final resting place, to retake the planet from the Separatists. Of course, Pandemic Studios would include 2 Renvar levels in their next game, Star Wars Battlefront.
The down transport is up ahead. Make sure it stays in one piece.
I think it's a bit too late for that, Master. After 2 missions filled with tank action, walker action, and dropship action, the Republic retakes the planet from the Separatists. Anakin then visits the Force Ghost of Qel-Droma, who teaches him how to defeat the Dark Reaper and lays on some pretty thick foreshadowing. The final levels of the game take place on and around the ancient Sith world of Thule, where the Jedi and Republic forces fight to stop the Separatists from rebuilding the Dark Reaper. The first level has Anakin destroy the planetary shield generator on the Thule moon. This is followed by 2 levels where Obi-Wan and Mace land on Thule and take out the planetary defenses. The final level has Anakin make his way through the ancient city, destroying the Separatist forces in his way, including Dooku's bounty hunter, before taking on the Dark Reaper itself. The boss battle consists of Anakin destroying all of the Reaper's weapons while avoiding its death ray. Luckily, the spirit of Ulic Qel-Droma is there to whisper tips in Anakin's ear.
Destroy the Harvester base.
With the Dark Reaper destroyed, the story mode ends with Obi-Wan and Anakin admiring the extent of their damage, cross-cut with Mace and Yoda planning their next move.
Won the battle we have.
I'm sorry, but you didn't do anything. Typical senior management, always taking credit for other people's work. And so that's it for the campaign, but the Clone Wars also includes local split-screen multiplayer. We've got the Duel mode, which is your standard 2-player deathmatch, Control Zone, which is a King of the Hill type mode, and Conquest, where players must capture and defend command posts. Pandemic would of course repurpose this mode 2 years later in Star Wars Battlefront. But the multiplayer mode, which will forever be associated with the Clone Wars game, is Geonosis Academy. This mode repurposes the Jedi gameplay from the campaign, pulls the camera way out, and sets it on the Geonosis arena. The goal here is to work together to take on waves of enemies. However, after 3 waves, it suddenly becomes a duel to the death against your friend. Who remembers the tension of running to opposite sides of the arena at the end of the 3rd round? And I must say, all these years later, this mode is still a lot of fun to play. Look, all the Geonosians in the crowd are like, what the hell's going on? I didn't pay to see this. And so there we have it, Star Wars The Clone Wars on PlayStation 5. Like most PS5 ports, this game remains unchanged apart from a bump in resolution for better or worse. Luckily, the Clone Wars still holds up. It's not the deepest or best looking 6th generation Star Wars game, but the gameplay is still really satisfying. It's also really interesting to see the origins of the Battlefront series established in this game, and the plot, while pretty simple, does make some cool nods to the expanded universe, while also being one of the first pieces of media to show us events after the end of episode 2. So please let me know your thoughts on the Clone Wars game in the comments below. What was your favorite mission, favorite vehicle, and how many Wookiees did you accidentally kill? As always, thanks for watching. Please consider supporting me on Patreon, and a big thanks to all my existing patrons. Also, if you've enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.